We'll handle the client meeting, my manager said, nudging my laptop away from me like I was a kid playing with something meant for adults. You're just not senior enough for this one, Megan. The way he grinned when he said it, that condescending little twitch at the corner of his mouth, made my stomach twist. 5 months of research, 3 weeks of sleepless nights, my vision, my strategy, my slides, and now I was being pushed aside. I nodded and swallowed that familiar lump in my throat as I watched Derek and Lisa, who had contributed absolutely nothing to this proposal, walk into the conference room carrying my work under their arms like it belonged to them. They didn't even bother changing the footer with my initials. I'm Megan Riley, 34, and until today, I thought I understood how the corporate world operated. Before I continue this story that still makes my hands tremble when I tell it, drop a comment with where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had someone steal credit for your effort. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. 2 years ago, I joined Vertex Solutions as a senior technical analyst. Not entry-level, not inexperienced. I arrived with 10 years of specialized expertise in data infrastructure optimization, the kind of knowledge that makes most people's eyes glaze over at dinner parties, but earns companies millions when applied correctly. It's not glamorous work, but it's valuable. At least the outcomes are. What no one warns you about as you climb the corporate ladder is that eventually it stops being about your abilities and starts being about who's inside which circle. I definitely wasn't in Derek's circle. Derek, our vice president of client services, played golf with our chief executive officer. He wore tailored suits and had that polished silver fox charm that made the executive assistants giggle. What Derek didn't possess was any real understanding of technical infrastructure. Not that it ever stopped him from presenting on it. The $8,200,000 Blackstone account wasn't just another client. It was the client. The one that would put our mid-size firm on the national map. The one that would determine bonuses, promotions, and probably a few terminations. They'd been pursuing Blackstone for years before I arrived with no success, until I uncovered the core flaw in their existing system. A subtle, intricate inefficiency that was costing them roughly $3,400,000 per year. I discovered it buried deep in their operational data, the kind of issue you only detect after years of learning exactly which anomalies to search for. This is strong, Megan. Really strong. My direct supervisor, Julia, had said when I first shared my findings 3 months earlier. Let's refine this further before moving it up. I trusted Julia. She was the only female director in our entire division, the one who had hired me. She understood what it felt like to be underestimated. For 5 months, I lived and breathed the Blackstone proposal. I skipped my sister's birthday weekend. I worked straight through a stomach flu so bad I kept a trash can tucked under my desk. I developed the entire analysis, built out the implementation strategy, crafted the financial projections, and assembled a phase-by-phase transition plan that minimized disruption while maximizing savings. Last week, when we received word that Blackstone's full executive team, including their famously difficult-to-impress chief technology officer, wanted an in-person presentation, the office erupted. This was it. Our moment. Excellent work, team, Derek announced during our department meeting. Julia and I will finalize the presentation strategy. We need our absolute A-game here. I nodded, waiting for my role to be clarified. I'd be presenting the technical sections. Obviously, the questions would be complex, highly specific. They'd need someone who understood the details intimately, but the meeting ended without my name ever being spoken. Later that afternoon, Julia stopped by my desk. Her expression already told me everything. Derek thinks we should keep the presentation lineup senior level only, she said softly. Image thing? You know how it is. But it's my analysis, I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. How will they respond to technical questions? Julia looked uneasy. I'll be there to handle those. You've walked me through everything, and I've got your slides. Derek feels strongly about this. And you? How do you feel? I asked. She didn't answer outright. She just squeezed my shoulder and said, Your time will come, Megan. This is how the game works. The game. Always the game. On the morning of the presentation, I arrived early. Julia had asked me to be on standby in case they needed to pull me in for a specific question. We both knew it was a symbolic gesture. I watched from my desk as Blackstone's executives arrived, men in tailored suits, two women in equally polished attire, all carrying the self-assuredness that comes with true decision-making power. Derek greeted them in the lobby with his practiced charm. Julia stood a step behind, smiling professionally. They disappeared into our largest conference room, the one with glass walls, so everyone could watch, but not hear what was unfolding inside. My presentation, all 64 slides of my work, sat printed in leather portfolios bearing the Vertex logo. Not my name. Never my name. 10 minutes in, I watched Derek gesturing animatedly at my slides. 20 minutes in, Julia was pointing at my technical diagrams. 30 minutes in, I saw the Blackstone Chief Technology Officer, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and a reputation for technical brilliance, lean forward, intrigued. And that's when I felt it. Not anger exactly. Something colder, sharper, a clarity. They were showcasing my work, but it wasn't complete. I had made a deliberate decision 3 days earlier, after being told I wouldn't be allowed in this room. I'd removed the most essential technical specification from the implementation section, the proprietary algorithm that made the entire solution possible. Without it, the proposal was impressive, but ultimately unusable. Only I knew how to execute it. Only I understood the mathematical depth behind it. It wasn't written down anywhere else. I had told myself it was for security reasons, for protecting proprietary logic. But sitting there watching them claim ownership, I understood the truth. This was my insurance policy. My guarantee that, eventually, someone would have to acknowledge that I existed. The algorithm wasn't in the slides. It wasn't in the documents. It lived solely in my mind. 40 minutes into the presentation, I saw it unfold. The Blackstone Chief Technology Officer was asking a question. Her face shifted from curious to concerned. Derek's confident grin wavered. Julia rifled through the papers in front of her in a panic. Then, as if choreographed, everyone in the conference room turned their heads toward me through the glass walls. My phone lit up with a message from Julia. Conference room. Now. My pulse pounded as I stood. Coworkers watched quietly as I walked the longest 30 feet of my career. I straightened my blazer, inhaled deeply, and pushed open the door. Ah, here she is, Derek said with a strained smile that never reached his eyes. Megan is one of our analysts who helped compile some of the data. Some of the data. Not the entire damn proposal. Some of the data. The Blackstone Chief Technology Officer, Sarah Levinson, I now realized from her nameplate, looked straight at me. Ms. Riley, your colleagues seem unable to explain the precise algorithm that safeguards against data corruption during the transition phase. The concept is outlined here. She tapped my slide, but the actual mechanism is unclear. Without it, this entire proposal is theoretically compelling but practically useless to us. Silence washed over the room. Derek's face darkened. Julia stared at me with something between desperation and dread. This was the moment. The moment I had been subconsciously preparing for without ever admitting it out loud. I could rescue them, or I could speak the truth. I could play the game, or I could overturn the entire board. I pulled out a chair directly across from Sarah Levinson, not at the side, not hovering awkwardly near the door. I sat where I belonged, forcing Derek to scoot his chair over. The algorithm isn't in the slides, I said evenly, because it's intricate enough that it would be meaningless in a presentation. It's a 9-step process that merges advanced data verification protocols with a layered encryption method I designed specifically for Blackstone's system. Sarah Levinson's eyebrows lifted a fraction. You developed it? Yes, I said, meeting her eyes without flinching. I created the entire solution you've been evaluating today. You could have heard a pin drop. Derek cleared his throat, gearing up to jump in with damage control. But Sarah Levinson lifted her hand, stopping him effortlessly without even glancing in his direction. Perhaps, she said, still holding my gaze. You should walk us through this algorithm, Miss Riley. For the next 20 minutes, I broke down the technical backbone of my solution. I sketched diagrams across the whiteboard. I responded to increasingly detailed questions from Sarah and her technical director. With every answer, I saw recognition dawn in their expressions. They were finally speaking to the person who truly understood the problem. Derek and Julia sat frozen in uneasy silence. They couldn't add anything. They couldn't even follow sections of the discussion. They had been exposed, not by anything I said, but by their own glaring lack of understanding of the material they had been showcasing. When I finished, Sarah Levinson leaned back in her chair. Well, she said, that clarifies things considerably. She turned to Derek with a calm coolness that nearly made me smile. Mr. Peterson, I'm curious why Miss Riley wasn't included in this presentation from the start, considering she's clearly the architect of the solution. Derek's face twisted into a strained smile. We value all our team members, but we generally have senior leadership handle client-facing opportunities of this scale. Experience has shown. In my experience, Sarah cut in, the people who do the actual work tend to deliver the most meaningful presentations. She turned back to me. Miss Riley, if we proceed with Vertex, would you be the implementation lead? Before Derek could jump in and answer for me, I said that would be my expectation. Yes. I could almost hear Derek's teeth grinding. Sarah nodded, satisfied. Good, because I'm not interested in working with figureheads. I need to partner with whoever actually understands our systems. The meeting wrapped up soon after with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions. As the Blackstone team exited, Sarah Levinson handed me her card. Not Derek. Not Julia. Me. Call me directly with any additional thoughts, she said. I have a few more technical questions when you have a moment. The conference room door closed behind them, leaving me alone with Derek and Julia. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Derek's jaw was rigid, a vein pulsing in his forehead. Julia stared down at the table, avoiding my eyes entirely. What the hell was that? Derek finally hissed. You intentionally withheld information from the presentation materials. I met his glare evenly. I focused on what needed to be included in the slides versus what required direct explanation. It was a judgment call. A judgment call? His voice spiked before he forced himself to lower it, glancing at the glass walls. You made me look like an idiot in there. I did my job, I answered evenly. I solved Blackstone's problem. Isn't that what we're paid to do? Derek slammed his palm against the table. You think you're clever, don't you? You think this little stunt helps your career? I think this little stunt just saved the biggest pitch in company history, I replied, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. Would you have preferred I let you stumble through an answer you didn't have? Julia finally lifted her eyes. Megan, you should have told us about the algorithm ahead of time. We could have prepared. The hurt in her voice, as if I were the one who'd betrayed her, made something cold snap inside me. Prepared? How exactly? I asked, gathering my notes. By having me write out the explanation so one of you could deliver it? Or would you have finally allowed me into the room, only if you realized you couldn't handle it without me? Neither of them responded. They didn't have to. We all understood this truth. I stood to leave, but Derek stepped in front of me. This isn't over, Megan, not by a long shot. I met his stare without flinching. You're right about that. Walking back to my desk felt unreal. Colleagues glanced up with questioning looks. No one knew exactly what had unfolded, but they sensed the shift in the atmosphere. Power always has a way of changing the air around it. My computer pinged with a calendar invite, an emergency meeting with Human Resources and our Chief Executive Officer, scheduled for 4:30 p.m. The subject line simply read, "Conduct review." 3 hours. That's how long it took Derek to mobilize against me. I wasn't surprised. Wounded egos are dangerous, especially in men unaccustomed to being challenged. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into that conference room an hour earlier. Something inside me had solidified. I spent those 3 hours meticulously documenting everything. Every email updating the team on my progress. Every meeting where my contributions were noted. Every instance where I had specifically developed parts of the proposal that Derek and Julia later presented as their own. I printed copies and backed everything up to my personal email. At 4:28 p.m., I walked into Richard Barnes's office. He was there, along with Derek, Julia, and Vanessa from HR. Richard had built Vertex from the ground up 20 years ago and had a reputation for being tough but fair. I was about to test that reputation. "Megan, take a seat," Richard said, his expression unreadable. "We need to discuss what happened today with Blackstone." I sat, placing my folder of documentation on the table. "I agree." Derek jumped in immediately. "Richard, she deliberately sabotaged the presentation. She withheld critical information to make the rest of us look incompetent." "Is that true, Megan?" Richard asked. I inhaled deeply. "What's true is that I developed the entire Blackstone proposal over 5 months. What's true is that 3 days ago, I was told I wasn't senior enough to present my own work. What's true is that the algorithm in question is too complex to be effectively explained in slides. It required direct explanation from its creator." Derek started to interrupt, but Richard held up a hand. "Let her finish." I opened my folder. I have every email, every meeting note, every draft showing my role as the primary architect of the Blackstone proposal. I also have documentation proving that neither Derek nor Julia contributed substantively to the technical solution or strategy. They presented work they couldn't explain because they didn't create it. Vanessa from HR looked uneasy. Julia stared at her hands. Derek's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Are you threatening us?" he demanded. "I am establishing facts," I replied calmly. "The fact is, I found Blackstone's inefficiency. I developed the solution. I created the implementation plan. And today, I saved the presentation when the questions became too technical for either of you." Richard leaned back, studying me with interest. "Why didn't you include the algorithm in the slides, Megan? Let's be honest." The room went quiet. This was the moment of truth. "Because if I had, you would never have known what happened in that room," I said quietly. After months of being overlooked and underestimated, I needed leverage. I needed proof my contribution mattered. Was it calculated? Yes. Was it wrong? I don't believe so. No one was harmed. In fact, the client was impressed enough that I'm confident we'll win the contract. Richard's eyes narrowed. "That's quite an admission." "It's the truth," I said. "I'm done playing games." Derek saw his opening. "See? She admits she manipulated the situation. This is grounds for immediate termination, Richard. We can't have employees who deliberately undermine leadership." Richard held up his hand, looking at Vanessa. "Has Sarah Levinson from Blackstone reached out since the meeting?" Vanessa nodded, uneasy. "Yes. She sent an email about an hour ago. She was very impressed with the proposal." Particularly, she glanced at me with acknowledgement of Ms. Riley's technical expertise. She specifically requested that I be the primary contact for all implementation discussions moving forward. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. Richard turned back to me. So, Blackstone wants you specifically? Yes. And you believe you can deliver what you promised them? Absolutely. Richard nodded slowly, then addressed Derek and Julia. Leave us, please. I need to speak with Megan alone. The look of shocked betrayal on Derek's face almost made the entire ordeal worthwhile. Almost. He stood, straightening his jacket with affected dignity. Richard, I strongly advise— Thank you, Derek. Richard cut him off. We'll discuss this further tomorrow. After they left, Vanessa following behind, Richard studied me for a long moment. That was a dangerous game you played today, he finally said. It wasn't a game to me, I replied. It was my career. He nodded slightly. Fair enough. But you understand that intentionally withholding information, regardless of outcome, raises concerns. I understand that taking credit for others' work also raises concerns, I countered, as does systematic exclusion of qualified team members based on arbitrary hierarchies rather than actual expertise. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're not backing down, are you? No, I said simply. I'm not. He leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Megan. You're going to lead the Blackstone implementation because, frankly, we don't have a choice. Sarah Levinson made that clear. You'll report directly to me on this project, not through Derek. If you deliver what you promised, if you bring in that $200,000 contract and execute it successfully, we'll revisit your position in the company. I nodded, processing his words. And if I don't deliver, then this conversation becomes very different. His tone made the implication unmistakable. Understood, I said. As I stood to leave, Richard added, One more thing, Megan. The technical details you developed. The algorithm. Is it documented anywhere now? I smiled slightly. It will be by tomorrow morning. Good, he said. Because while I admire your strategic thinking, I don't appreciate being vulnerable to individual leverage. Don't make that play again. No need, I replied. Once is enough if people are paying attention. The next 2 weeks were a strange mix of victory and isolation. Word had spread through the office about what happened, though the details varied depending on who was telling it. Derek avoided me entirely. Julia attempted an awkward apology over coffee that felt more like damage control than genuine remorse. I just want you to know I fought for you to be in that meeting, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. But not hard enough, I replied. She flinched. It's complicated, Megan. You know how it is. I'm starting to understand exactly how it is, I said, getting up to leave. That's the problem. The only person who treated me normally was Raj from the development team, who stopped by my desk the day after the confrontation and simply said, About time someone called their bluff. Need any help with the Blackstone specs? Raj became my unofficial ally as I prepared for the follow-up meeting with Blackstone. We worked late refining the technical specifications, building out implementation timelines. I documented everything meticulously. No more leverage plays, as promised to Richard. 1 week after the initial presentation, Sarah Levinson requested a video call with me. Not Derek, not Julia, just me. Ms. Riley, she said when the call connected, I've reviewed your additional documentation. It's impressive work. Thank you, I replied. And please, call me Megan. She nodded. Megan? Then I'll be direct. Blackstone is prepared to move forward with Vertex on this project, but we have some conditions. I'm listening. First, we want you contractually designated as the project lead, not just internally, but formally in our agreement. Second, we want quarterly technical reviews directly with you throughout the implementation. And third, she paused, We want the right to take you with us if we're not satisfied with Vertex's support structure around your solution. My heart pounded. Take me with them? To be blunt, we're impressed with your capabilities, but less impressed with how your company managed them. The solution you developed is valuable to us. If Vertex can't properly support your implementation, we'd want the option to hire you directly as a consultant to ensure continuity. I sat back, stunned. This wasn't just leverage. This was a parachute. That's unusual, I managed. Sarah smiled slightly. So is finding someone who genuinely understands our infrastructure challenges. I recognize talent, Megan, and I protect my company's interests. After the call, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking. Then I drafted an email to Richard outlining Blackstone's conditions. I didn't editorialize or apologize. I simply presented their terms clearly and asked for his response. His reply came within 30 minutes. My office, 3:01 p.m. When I arrived, Richard wasn't alone. The company's legal counsel, Marcia Winters, was there too. These terms are highly irregular, Marcia said after introductions. The clause allowing them to potentially hire you away creates significant risk. For whom? I asked. Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly. For Vertex, obviously, Marcia replied. Because I might leave, or because other clients might make similar requests once they realize where the value actually comes from? I asked. Richard leaned forward. What exactly are you saying, Megan? I'm saying that Blackstone has recognized something Vertex hasn't. They see that technical expertise deserves direct client access and proper credit. They're willing to put that in a contract because they value what I bring to the table. The question is, does Vertex? Richard and Marcia exchanged glances. We value all our employees, Richard began. Then prove it, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my boldness. Accept Blackstone's terms, and let's discuss what my role at Vertex should really look like going forward. The next 2 hours were the most intense negotiation of my life. By the end, we had an agreement. I would remain the designated Blackstone project lead. I would be promoted to technical director, reporting directly to Richard. And this was the part that nearly made Marcia walk out. I would receive a percentage of the Blackstone contract value as a performance bonus. This sets a dangerous precedent, Marcia warned as we finalized the terms. It sets the right precedent, Richard countered, surprising me. We recognize and reward the people who create value. He looked at me with newfound respect. Just make sure you deliver, Megan. I will, I promised. When I left Richard's office, I felt lightheaded. In the span of 2 weeks, I had gone from being sidelined to securing a promotion, a raise, and a direct line to our CEO, all because I finally stopped accepting the unacceptable. The following Monday, Richard called an all-hands meeting to announce the Blackstone contract, $8,200,000, officially signed. He also announced my promotion to technical director and my role leading the implementation team. I stood near the back, watching Derek's face as Richard praised my innovative solution and technical leadership. His expression was a rigid mask, eyes burning with barely contained rage. Julia clapped politely, a tight smile fixed on her face. After the meeting, as people dispersed, Derek approached me for the first time since our confrontation. Congratulations, he said, the word tasting like acid on his tongue. Quite the coup you've pulled off. It wasn't a coup, Derek, I replied. It was a correction. He leaned closer, dropping his voice. Don't get comfortable. This company has a long memory. I smiled, not backing down. So do I. And unlike some people, I document everything, including this conversation. His eyes widened slightly, and I continued. My first act as technical director will be reviewing all ongoing projects for proper attribution and credit. I think Richard will find it very interesting to see who's actually doing the work around here versus who's taking credit for it. Derek stepped back, reassessing me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow now. "You're right about that," I agreed. "It's just beginning." 6 months later, I sat across from Sarah Levinson at Blackstone's headquarters, presenting the successful first phase results of our implementation. The projected savings had actually exceeded estimates by 7%. "I'm impressed, Megan," Sarah said. "Your team has delivered exactly what you promised." My team. The word still felt strange sometimes. After my promotion, I had built a technical implementation group from scratch, bringing in Raj and 3 other talented analysts who had been similarly overlooked. We worked directly with clients. No figureheads, no filtering of credit. Derek had eventually been reassigned to a special projects role that everyone recognized as a demotion. Julia had made awkward attempts at allyship once my star began rising, but I kept our relationship strictly professional. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. As for me, I had changed too. I spoke up more in meetings. I insisted on proper credit for my team members. I mentored junior women in the company, making sure they knew their worth from the beginning. The day after the successful Blackstone review, Richard called me into his office. "2 more companies have reached out asking specifically for you and your team," he said, sliding contracts across the desk, combined value of approximately $12 million if we land them both. I smiled. "We'll land them." He nodded, studying me. "You know, when you pulled that stunt in the Blackstone meeting, I nearly fired you on the spot." "I know, but then I realized something. You weren't being insubordinate for its own sake. You were fighting to be recognized for your actual value." He leaned back. This company needed that wake-up call. I thought about how my life had changed in 6 months. The respect I'd earned, the team I'd built, the systems I'd helped change. "Not just this company," I said. "I needed it too." That night, I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights, thinking about how differently things could have gone if I'd stayed quiet, played by the old rules, or accepted being erased. One small decision to remove that algorithm from the slides had changed everything. Not because it was manipulative, but because it forced the truth into the open. Sometimes that's all it takes. One moment of refusing to be invisible. I still keep Sarah Levinson's card in my wallet. I never needed the escape hatch she offered, but knowing it was there gave me the courage to fight for my place instead of running. Sometimes the best revenge isn't escaping the system that tried to diminish you, it's transforming it into one that recognizes your true worth. So if you're watching this and you've ever been sidelined, overlooked, or had your work stolen, know that you have more power than you realize. The truth has a way of demanding to be heard. You just have to be brave enough to let it speak. What's your story? Have you ever had to fight to be recognized for your work? Drop a comment below. I want to know I'm not alone in this.